Let's get things started. What do you think? Just like what introduction was saying, that my name is Luki from Chainbase. I'm head of ecosystem and strategy. And here we have three amazing panelists here in AI and Web3 space. First of all, let's start off with Ryuk, who is building a gaming asset platform. Would you give us a little bit of introduction?
Hi, everyone. Ryuk here, CTO of Iagent. What we are building is a visual learning infrastructure to train your agents using visual data. So we are providing it in multiple different games, in multiple different journals, where it can optimize it. You can train it by yourself. And purely we work in visual data. That is most untapped data in the world. So we are not doing any LLMs or diffusion models. We focus on visual data and we train visual agents.
Very cool. And the reason that I go from this order, have Ryuk to talk about his project first, is it's more on the application level. It's more on the user interface level. But then I will jump to Matthew for OpenGradient, because that's kind of in the middle of like the models and etc. So why don't you give us a little introduction?
Yeah, hey, I'm Matthew, one of the co-founders of OpenGradient. OpenGradient is a decentralized platform for hosting models, secure inference, agentic reasoning, and application deployment. And we aim to essentially build this infrastructure and platform that makes it easy for developers in Web3 to utilize AI or ML in a way that is both super secure and seamless, and allowing them to integrate these workflows into their applications to make them smarter, more intelligent, more optimized. And we're building a lot of the models ourselves and making this infrastructure and dev tooling as accessible as possible.
Maybe some of you here in the audience already know about this platform, which I know is called Hugging Face. So my question is, how do you differentiate? What's the difference between OpenGradient and Hugging Face?
Yeah, so the biggest difference between Web 2 and Web 3 is that Web 3 is a highly adversarial environment with blockchains being replicate state machines, right? People want to ensure that, hey, if I'm running some program on the blockchain, that it's verifiable because I have funds being custodied in this smart contract, as an example. And as a result, when it comes to compute, people often rely on technologies such as ZK to ensure that, hey, some compute was run faithfully, and it was not. I wouldn't be exploited if part of it was off chain, things like that. And kind of talking about the model hub that we have versus OpenGradient, we have a lot of these technologies working out of the box. So as an example, if you uploaded a model to our hub and you wanted to inference it securely, you have options including running it in a TE. You could generate ZKML proofs. You have optimistic forms of security as well that ensure that, hey, if I'm dedicating inference for my AI ML workflow to OpenGradient, that there are certain parts of it that make it verifiable and secure. And that's kind of the biggest differentiating factor we have compared to a platform like Hugging Face. These tools and technologies that come with OpenGradient work out of the box for you and make it easy for you to build this, build these workflows in your smart contracts.
Very cool. So it's more than just taking a product from the shelf. It's actually you can customize and make it flexible and cater to the project you want to build. That's very cool. So next, we'll go to Mark from Aethir. This is the reason I have Mark to talk about his project. The last is that's the very foundation of the AI and Web3. So I have Mark tell you a little bit about what he's building. But first of all, I do want you to also maybe touch base about what GPU is, just for the audience who doesn't understand the term.
Yeah, hey, Mark here, co-founder at Aethir. Effectively, the GPU, right, it's a chip. It's the engine that powers AI, right? It was originally pretty much designed for gaming, a graphical processing unit, and there were a number of innovations that made it apparent that processing and training LLMs on GPUs was more efficient than CPUs, and as a result of that, we now have more of a reliance on GPUs than in the AI space than maybe anyone anticipated a decade or so ago. But effectively, GPUs are the engine that powers AI, right? When you talk about large language models being trained, taking ChatGPT 3 to ChatGPT 4, when you talk about AI applications being live, right? that whole process of training or keeping the agent or the application alive is all running on the back of GPU compute. And at Aethir, we're effectively a decentralized GPU infrastructure layer for AI companies and gaming companies. Effectively, anyone that needs access to GPUs, we make that access more readily available in a friendlier kind of user and enterprise-focused way. Effectively, you can think of us like an AWS or a Google Cloud, but our focus is exclusively on GPUs, and we don't actually own any of the GPUs in our network. Actually, all of the GPUs within our ecosystem are contributed by others, whether they're tech companies, other startups, telcos, data centers. Pretty much anyone with access to enterprise-grade compute can contribute that compute to our network, and then we can essentially expose that compute out to the world in the same way that maybe Airbnb does with rooms that are in your home, or a Booking.com does with available hotel rooms in a hotel, for example.
Very cool, very cool. And I do have a lot of questions about the usage, regulation, etc., about GPU. So we can talk a little bit about that later here. But our theme of this topic is a smarter onboarding for the decentralized future. So onboarding. Each project has your specific developers or audience that you want to target. You want to make their onboarding easier. So let's go with Ryuk. Who is your audience? Who are you building the platform for? And how do you make it smarter for them to onboard?
Yeah, the thing is, what we are building is an infrastructure for visual learning. So our audience are wide. Now we focus on gaming domain, where any of the players can train their own AI agents, which can exactly play like them. The use cases are wide, where you can apply in games like Counter-Strike, or games like Pixelmon, few other games. Like even the journals are different, because each of the gamers, they like a certain type of games, certain genre of games. So we want to onboard gamers to bring the next generation of gaming, where you see AI and players play together. So this is our product focus. On the infrastructure focus, we want to open source our core model, where more of a Hugging Face like we discussed before from Matthew. So where it's a visual learning infrastructure it's similar to Hugging Face, where multiple LLMs are trained, variations of LLMs are trained. People contribute, people adapt to a specific domain or industry. So similarly, we want to enable our visual learning infrastructure for developers to build above that, to add support to multiple different games or build variations of our AI. So we are also planning to onboard the developers who focus on computer vision and who focus on human behavioral cloning. And on the other side, we also wanted to onboard more of game developers, where we want to speed up their game bot training process much faster, because we have been speaking with more than 20 plus games so far. The amount of time they spend in building the NPC is enormous. So with our AI, we want to reduce the time to train your NPCs for a newly built game. So we're also focusing on game developers to reduce their training time. And yeah, I think these are all our main target audiences who we like to onboard from Web 2 to Web 3.
Which, to me, it's very niche industry, like gaming. Maybe there's much more gamers out there than I thought. But do you think the demographic, like you guys are attracting good amount of gamers from Web 2 and Web 3 in order to build better games and help training the models?
Yes, that's why we have started our company around 2.5 years back. It was more on research. Once we started research, we know who will be our target audience. So from then on to now, we signed 5 top-tier esports teams, like Team Secret, Team Alliance, all of our official partners. And we signed more than 20 plus games as our partners to release our preliminary tech inside their game. So we have taken our footprints really, really deep into like who we are targeting, where we are focusing, and what all the things that we need to bring this tech to Web 2 also. Because gamers in Web 3s are much, much smaller than gamers in Web 2. And we want to build the tech where we can able to onboard few of the gamers from even from Web 2 to Web 3 and Web 3 to Web 2 as well. Yeah.
Very nice, very nice. Here, I'm jumping to Matthew over here from OpenGradient. Who is your audience and how do you make onboarding smarter for them?
Yeah, so our target audience is developers, pretty straightforward. And actually, one of the core tenets of OpenGradient is to make developing AR or ML workflows in a secure and seamless way as accessible as possible to developers. So one of the reasons why I initially started building it was, hey, I wanted to build an ML-driven AMM, and I realized that to build this ML workflow into a smart contract or into a Web3, in the Web3 space, I needed to, source my own compute. I needed to figure out how to use arcane ZKML libraries to generate proofs, to deploy on-chain contracts that then validate the proof, figure out how to use hardware acceleration to make that, fast and scalable. And it was kind of like a week-long process just to figure out how to, run inference in a way that was secure. And there's also kind of like, okay, well, if I want to get, verifiable data access, I got to use, potentially TLS certified kind of TEE to access data. It was just such a huge development effort, and I realized that a lot of this should be and could be abstracted away. So today, what we've done with OpenGradient is we've abstracted away everything, right? When it comes to proof generation, attestation generation, validation of those attestations or proofs, storage of them on a DA layer, that's all done by our infra. All you need to do is specify the model ID, the input parameters, and you click run, and you don't need to think about it much more. We've also built a lot of tools that allow developers to, version the releases of their models. They can leverage pre-compiles for things like, standardization of their features or data pre-processing for their AR or ML workflows. And all of this is kind of like dev tooling that needs to exist for people to develop these applications, right? So yeah, we're very excited to kind of continue pushing on dev tooling that makes this just as easy and as accessible of a technology as possible.
So while you're building those tools, so how's the user feedback? How do you know those are the tools that the users actually need?
Yeah, so a lot of our feature development is being informed by what our clients want, right? We have a huge kind of laundry list of things we want to incorporate, and it's just, hey, some client comes back and says they want this prioritized, we'll prioritize development of that feature. So that's how we've been kind of thinking about it internally. And in terms of the feedback, it's actually been quite good because people are surprised sometimes that things just work. We've gotten feedback saying like, hey, I never knew this existed. I was expecting it to be clunky, but we integrated the SDK. So I guess for context, we also have a Python SDK that allows developers to interface with all of our infrastructure without having to build, Solidity smart contracts. But people just use our Python SDK. They're just like, well, yeah, proof generation, all this stuff, just like is abstracted away and done behind the backgrounds. I don't need to think about it or worry about how it's done. And yeah, it's been good so far.
That must be very satisfying to hear from your users regarding those feedback, right?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. So Mark, let's talk about the users you guys are trying to onboard. In my opinion, with the GPU, you guys are engaging with the users, developers who need to use GPU and also the providers as well. So you have actually two sides of the audience that you need to target. How do you make onboarding smarter for them?
I think, first of all, the majority of our customers are Web 2 customers, right? So you have to realize that a lot of Web 2 customers don't like interfacing with Web 3 things, right? If they're a big enterprise, maybe they're crypto allergic, maybe they don't like touching or holding tokens, so you have this complexity where you need to find a way to onboard those customers into the systems that make having your ecosystem based in Web3 relevant, right? So I mean, there's a lot of different pieces to the puzzle to kind of understand to make sure that the entire system kind of attracts and accrues value in the way that you want the ecosystem to do so. With that being said, I think that what we're building is relatively simple, right? It is a platform that gives you access to a resource that people have been purchasing for a while, right? Everyone understands how to go and get, or if you're in the space where you're needing GPUs, you probably understand how to access them, right? So this workflow is familiar. We don't want to reinvent the wheel. We don't want to have to educate customers into any new processes for accessing GPUs, right? So pretty much from start to finish, everything's incredibly familiar. Actually, we've done our very best to kind of abstract away anything Web3 related on our platform. We actually found that making our website to Web3 adjacent turned off customers in the Web2 space, even just on arrival to the landing pages, right? So we've done our best to kind of abstract that out of abstract Web3 away, and we've actually set up kind of a full Web2 entity that can operate as like a middleman and still service big customers, right? I think the challenge here is when you look at where the revenue exists, right? The vast majority of that revenue doesn't exist in kind of a Venn diagram of like crypto and revenue overlapping. You know what I mean? There's very few companies that have deep pockets that are looking to purchase large amounts of compute. So if you want big customers, if you want access to a lot of revenue, you need to have a Web2 onboarding process, something that connects what's meaningful to you with what's acceptable to the customer. And I think that process is generally really difficult to achieve as a result of kind of the complexity of existing in the crypto space. But also I think that no one's really done it all that well in crypto so far. But I think that we're doing an incredibly good job. And I think that one of the only ways, unfortunately, you can do that is by creating some form of entity that operates on behalf of your company that kind of can act as a bridge. But there's always going to be this kind of counterparty risk and this kind of arbitrage or volatility between existing in purely fiat world and this conversion to the token that has to happen somewhere. So it's a challenge and there's risk on one side of the equation. But if you can't overcome that, then it's going to be really difficult for you to onboard big enterprise customers.
So would you say, if I understand it correctly, would you say from the customer side, you're trying to make it more Web2 friendly? So you're making it more kind of a neutral to Web2 and Web3. They don't see the differences. But for the provider side, you're making it a little bit more Web3 because everyone can get a slice of the pie.
For sure. If you're on the provider side, if you're allocating compute to the ecosystem, you will receive all your rewards in crypto, right? There's no fiat output to the rewards yet. Maybe that's something we'll do later, but surely if you want to maximize your rewards, you'll be receiving that in our native token. That's the best way to get access to our ecosystem. But yeah, if you're a hardware provider, you're traditionally more crypto native, at least now. But there are still a number of ways that you can kind of ease the onboarding process there too, right? In decentralized networks, the biggest challenge you need to overcome is like trust, right? How do you trust that this hardware provider that's contributing to your network is, first of all, contributing the correct hardware, but second of all, is not just going to run and maybe break a contractual term and kind of cause you to have a poor experience with a customer that you're bringing onto that compute. So what you do in these ecosystems is you have someone stake, right? You have that hardware provider stake. They essentially put a deposit into your network, and you can take away their deposit if they act badly. The issue is with infrastructure providers in general, they spend their money on infrastructure. They don't have like this separate bank account for, stake, right? That's not something that exists in the Web2 world. So it's not a cost that they kind of anticipate having to provide for. So you can kind of also abstract that away. You can do kind of this third-party staking mechanism where essentially the community maybe can come and stake portions of this requirement and then share in a reward from the hardware provider. This is kind of a cool way to do it that's been kind of pioneered by companies like Filecoin and whatnot. But they're just really annoying pieces of what we have to do when we're building decentralized networks and interfacing with crypto. And you have to be creative about how you overcome those, because some companies will just never be crypto enough, and you don't want to lose out on those companies. Absolutely.
I think being creative, that's a very essential part of what you're trying to build for a company to tackle like the Web2 and Web3 space. So if you guys have some time, please go visit Aethir's blog posts as well. There are a lot of really good articles regarding onboarding, how they design the protocol, how they design incentivization. So really amazing insights from them. Take a look when you guys get a chance. But since we're on it regarding the user onboarding and there's like different different sides, right? There's like users, there's providers, there are data consumers, and there is data providers. So Ryuk, I just want to jump to you as well regarding regulation. When we talk about data, gaming data, the usage, how to utilize those data, fetching the data, providing the data, what is the regulation or compliance and you're trying to make it, I guess, tackle or make it smooth for users to actually give you that confidence that I can use this platform?
Yes, I think this is one of the problem really Web3 solves, because since Web3 we are able to communicate with different types of people and different geological locations, yeah, where everybody has their own consent to provide the data for the core. So we made our infrastructure open source, and our entire protocol is on a deep-in network, where any of the gamers who are providing the data to the deep-in network, they'll get rewarded back. That is basically you are selling your data, where you are a casual gamer, you are playing, where you record your data, because we have a simple web app that you can use to record and upload to our protocol. And our protocol communicates to BNB Greenfield. It's a decentralized data storage. So from there, the data will be accessible not only for our core training, also will be accessible for any of the developer who want to build above it. They can readily use the data. Because this is how Web3 is solving one of the major issues of compliance with respect to legal stuffs, where each and every user himself consenting, like selling his own data for the greater good. That's why at the beginning, we didn't want it to open source. Now after we apply for the patent, now we want to open source the core, because we believe open sourcing the infrastructure will help us to grow more and more, because that's what we have seen in other AI infrastructures. Like I think few years back, we were processing word by word, single word by word. Once Google created the diffusion transformer models, we were able to process multiple words at a time, and they open source the tech. And that is one of the main reasons now we are using ChatGPT every day. So this is something that we strongly believe. So we want also to open source our visual learning infrastructure for people to build above it, people to build variations of it. And because of its open source and decentralized, I think combining these two is like super powerful in terms of the issues and problems that comes like legal stuffs, compliance and stuff, yeah.
Which is really interesting. So when you're saying open source, especially for like gaming models, or you're trying to build some sort of a model to make a game development better and smoother, what does the like incentivization work for different models, or like how does that work to incentivize users to train?
Okay, it depends on the application, yeah. For example, one of the DApps that we foresee to come is Agent Marketplace. It's more of a esports focused. Like I said, we have tapped into like all the larger esports organizations in the world, more than 5 now. So all their players have like multiple millions of followers. So now, let's say that if one of the players creating his own agent, he can monetize it in the marketplace. It's like OnlyFans for pro esports players. So where your fan followers will get a chance to experience playing with you without you being there. So that's the easiest explanation. This is one of the DApps that you can build above the agent core. So, but again, I want to touch back to the point, it's visual learning infrastructure, which can be applied in different forms. Where if, in terms of developers, let's say if I'm going to code a NPC bot, yeah, like I'm building a new game, I want to build a bot which is like not dumb enough or not super hard enough for the people to enjoy. Now I need to sit and program. There are some initial libraries, but I still need to program it to make sure that the bot understands the new game environment. Now what we are doing is we are releasing a sandbox tool where you play the game as a developer because you have already built the game. Now you will have the initial calibrations for your NPC bot. So that will reduce your development time. So that's how the applications are different in terms of where it is being utilized.
I think this whole kind of ecosystem and what Iagent are building is so cool, right? When ChatGPT came out and the world was kind of exposed to what LLMs could do, I think the first thing that kind of the majority of gamers thought about was how much better a game's going to be. Like, let's just plug ChatGPT into all of the characters that exist in these games, and we'll have such greater, richer, more kind of interesting experiences, right? But that hasn't happened because the compute cost, the processing cost of having all of these different instances of large language models potentially existing across millions and millions of gamers worldwide, if not billions, is just kind of way, way too expensive, right? But having systems and innovations like what Iagent are doing not only allows game developers to produce their in-game characters quicker than a kind of a non-LLM or non-AI-based solution, but it also brings us kind of towards that kind of LLM-unlocked NPC character space, which I think is really cool. And I think it unlocks a whole bunch of other stuff, right? Like esports is so powerful. These gamers, these pro gamers are celebrities. Imagine being able to pull one of those gamers into your game and have them on your team, right? And play against your friends who maybe are a competing esport team. Even the kind of Pokemon model, I think, is really cool, right? Where right now, if you play a Pokemon game or a pet-related, companion-related game, the pet's not that smart. But what if you could kind of go to a marketplace, right, and pull a Pikachu that was trained by an expert trainer, like actually a Pokemon trainer, right? And then all of a sudden you have a Pikachu that's like got a personality, it acts and behaves in game in a certain way, and you can then take it into a sandbox and you can train it, you know, like it adds complexity and depth to games in such a cool manner.
That just screams addiction. The word addiction in my head. You're just trying to create more and more addiction to the gamers, so they stay with the computer the whole day.
I want to touch back on the point what Mark said. Recently, there were studies that the amount of players who plays the game is coming little lower and lower because of the boom of this battle royale games like PUBGs and stuff. So now, what we are lacking again, it's like free to play, where you go, you buy the skins. That is the only revenue model for them. So now, before you have like story games, all the different journals of games where people like to like buy a CD, buy a game directly from Steam, and they play. And the revenue that goes to the game developers and the game companies are like reducing because gamers want something new. So what we believe is we can able to give a new digital asset standard where it's a trained agents, where that is something that that will encourage the gamers to get revenue, that will encourage the game
Right.
companies to make
Right.
money. So we strongly believe that we can able to bring a new digital asset standard with a visual AI.
Very cool. And you also mentioned about open source. That's one thing that I do want to ask Matthew about, since you guys see a lot of the models built on your platform. About open source and closed source. I know we have majority of consensus is saying that open source will push the innovation forward much quicker and faster. But give us some thoughts regarding what you have seen on the platform and the models you have seen, open source, closed source. What are your insights about those?
Yeah, I think especially when it comes to Web3 use cases, a lot of specific use cases are, can leverage shared primitives, or that's kind of how we think about it, where as an example, if I build a simple ML model that provides some risk metric or risk forecast on some crypto asset like Bitcoin, that risk model is not just, it can be leveraged by not just lending protocols, but also like AMMs to scale fees dynamically. It could be used by vaults to improve their risk-adjusted yields for their users. It could be used for a lot of different protocols. Since risk is such a generic concept. And what we're kind of seeing here is we've developed these initial open source models that are now like kind of being improved on by a lot of the developers that we're working with, because they want to potentially not just improve the model or add their own spin to it. They run simulations off chain and tell us like, hey, I think, we want this model for a different crypto asset as well. So I think something we're very excited about is leveraging kind of the community element of Web3 to create these kind of developer groups that can hone in on creating better and more improved models as shared primitives for the Web3 space. And we're very excited to be kind of kickstarting that process. And it doesn't just like necessarily apply to LLMs, but also kind of this like whole ML space that we're kind of exploring.
So from what I'm getting, from what you said, is that it's more of a community effort. Let's not talk about open source, closed source. It's more of let's build something together. So sharing the knowledge to build something together greater.
Yeah, I think, open source is powerful because you have that community element, right? Because I can take a model that someone else has developed and be like, hey, how can this be improved? How might I take this model and create a model ensemble? Maybe I can use model stacking to reduce the error of these forecasts, right? It's because of these things that exist, that people can, continue building on each other's progress, and that's what we're very excited to continue to develop.
Very cool. So my last question for this panel is, OpenGradient actually posted an article. I'm all about reading articles, man. Posted an article about different verticals in Web3 and AI. I totally invite you guys to read through those. And I think there were 10 verticals that you guys put together. There's a reputation system, there's a security, there's an AI agent. So I want to invite each panelist to talk about which vertical you guys are bullish about, and especially for the protocols that you guys are building to accelerate the innovation forward for that specific vertical.
Yeah, so for us, I think a lot of it is going to be kind of in the DeFi, like protocol optimization space, just because I think that's kind of the lowest hanging fruit. Currently there is little to no optimization at all within DeFi. AMM's quote static fees, lending protocols have no risk management. These protocols are relatively simple, kind of just like Solidity scripts that are hacked together. So we're kind of excited to kind of take existing technology that has existed within the TradFi space. How do we, quote dynamic bid-ask spreads and translate that into dynamic fees for AMM swaps? How do we use risk models to adjust, portfolio exposures or, protocol exposure to different assets? Things like that, I think, are a primitive that I think is still criminally underexplored, considering that it's not rocket science. And when it comes to DeFi volume, we're talking about billions and trillions of dollars of volume that could potentially be made in a more optimized way through the technology that we're building.
Very cool, very cool. What about you, Mark?
How long until I can plug that into an agent and have like an agent manage my bags?
So I think when it comes to an agent managing bags, you're talking, potentially building mean variance, portfolio optimization techniques, and all this stuff. So we're actually working on that, and we actually do have an agent that a client of ours is launching end of this month that uses our spot returns forecasting ML models to provide, spot returns forecasts on different assets, and allows users to kind of bet against those forecasts so they can create hedges in their portfolios and things like that. So that's like one use case that we're starting with, and eventually we're going to build in more models and more workflows that can help it eventually get to the point where it can manage portfolios in a way that is actually better than most users are able to manage their portfolios.
Definitely better than I can, that's for sure. Yeah, I'm bullish on agents. I think the application layer for AI is so fascinating. It's so much more fun than I think infrastructure. There's a lot of opportunity for creativity. Smaller, more agile teams can build really, really cool stuff in the application space. Infrastructure is usually very expensive, slow moving, and we tend to over-optimize for infrastructure in crypto. And I think that now we're entering the kind of the exciting, fun phase, which is the application space. And I think agents are pioneering that effort. And I think that's just really cool.
Okay, so let's talk about your favorite agent then. Do you have a favorite agent?
We've actually deployed a $100 million ecosystem fund. We've made, I think, 3 batches of investments over the past 2 weeks into these agents. I won't pick a favorite. I don't want to get in trouble.
Every parent has a favorite child, but that's okay. But that ecosystem fund, that's actually huge. That's a really, really amazing for you guys to accelerate that program so that we actually have more and more people who want to build AI agents, have that motivation to build AI agents. So if you guys want to know more about it, visit Aethir's Web2 friendly website. Very lastly, Iagent. So, Ryuk, what do you think?
Yeah, I think, of course, I'm bullish on agents, but my target would be focusing on the niche. Of course, visual data. That is the most untapped data in the world. And we are seeing advancement in GPUs which was one of the biggest struggle for visual AIs to come into life. I think now it's like early Bitcoin days for visual AIs. So I'm super bullish on visual AIs.
Very nice, very nice. Well, that concludes our panel. Thank you so much for listening. Yeah, thank you so much, our panelists, for those questions. Some of the questions, or a lot of those questions, are actually not scripted, so they're kind of answering on the spot without even getting prepared. So thank you so much for improvising with me.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.